hope that you are all well and having a lovely conference so far and the remaining. Thank you very much to the organizers for such a interesting event and such a good variety of speakers and companies and nationalities. Well, I work for Barclays. I'm a data scientist for the People Analytics and Culture team. And today I would like to talk a little bit about surveys and kind of some of the interesting analyses that are really useful to understand what our colleagues have in mind. I think today I would like to cover a little bit this broad kind of points. I would like to talk a little bit about, the surveys, what kind of thing we can do with them, for example, exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis, and a little bit test modeling, for those questions in which you have test, while exploratory factor analysis and confirmatory factor analysis is a little bit more when you are kind of questions that are like between 1 and 10 or are a little bit between 1 and 5, these scales when you move from let's say strongly agree to strongly disagree or something like that. And then at the end we will recap, try to see a little bit of overall view and where you could find more materials. So a little bit, the first part, which is related to the survey as a questionnaire, we will see what is an exploratory factor analysis. What you have there are kind of a survey, and then you want to know if the survey after has been done is split in the kind of domains that you were thinking or considering, right? One of those could be, for example, engagement, or could be something like some culture attribute that you would like to measure, some of the values of the company, or some other concept or idea that you would like to measure. It's very common as well, like when you are in psychometrics, to be talking in personality traits or attitude or even beliefs. Once you kind of explore a little bit the kind of information that you have in the survey, you want to kind of summarize those, simplify those into domains and or index, and then from there you want to confirm that you are actually doing something which is reliable. And then when you know that you can create your own variables from or create variables or domain from the survey, then you could that have been already validated, you could use them for further analysis, because those are measurements and are more or less reliable and solid. Well, I think today I'm going to follow a lot this piece of work. I will share it. It is available in the link, but later at the end I will put other reference as well. However, I think this one is I'm going to show you here is a really good piece of work, and this is done by a person called William Rivell from Northwestern University. And this person developed a package called Psych in R, right? So this is a very complete guide to how to work in a survey. You can see there is a huge amount of topics here in the same paper. And the good thing, which I think is really lovely from this piece of work, is that is going to contain basically, or I'm going to talk today, but topic modeling with code, data samples. So that means that after the presentation, you could go here, take this work, and just reproduce the materials yourself, right? And I mentioned this is a pretty standard vanilla way to work with surveys, and you could easily apply to your particular case, psychometrics, or others, right? We will cover some of the analysis from that paper, like I-class, exploratory factor analysis, confirmatory factor analysis. I'm going to show you a little bit how they look like and how you could comment on them or talk about them. Then we will jump to this kind of question in which people introduce tests, and then we will just talk a little bit how to do that and a couple of examples. Excellent. A survey is a methodology that has been used for different purposes and a long period of time. And there are different ways to carry them out. There are different ways to create this, and they have a variety of techniques that have been developed just in this literature. I think, for example, it's very common in our case, try to run surveys to understand employees, but there are many cases where you can see how different institutions surveys to understand which is the vote intention, what kind of thing could be interesting or not, and understand a little bit different needs or customers or many other possibilities. I would like just to take one case. I'm going to follow this case, which is probably one of the more famous and really, really interesting one. And this is a kind of psychometric analysis or kind of questionnaire in which you basically have the personality traits, right? When you want to understand the different personalities of people, then you give them a questionnaire, and that with that questionnaire you could identify those 5 dimensions that you have there: openness, neuroticism, agreeableness, extraversion, consciousness. And this is very common. This is tremendously powerful because it has been extensively studied, and it's not exactly a service, it's more a psychometric, but you will understand the idea. Here you have some free data, and it's still very interesting for employees because there is a massive literature talking about all these kind of traits in the work environment or workplace. For example, consciousness is considered like the more relevant variable in terms of personality for success. Saying that, here you have a number of different questions that has exploited in this questionnaire. Here you have this is a code to identify a little bit the question. In this particular case, there is a lot of work already being done there. So this is a fairly clean and established questionnaire where probably when you have your own survey, you could have something a little bit not as studied as here, unless you are working with the same or similar survey for long periods of time, and is as well a possibility. Well, you will have here kind of a question, like for example, I'm indifferent to the feeling of others. I'm indifferent, sorry, to the feeling of other. I inquire about other well-being, and this is kind of different question that you're going to have. Here, the kind of answer that you're going to have is going to be from strongly disagree to strongly agree. In some cases, they could have different or opposite sign, like I'm indifferent to the feeling of others. This is kind of negative, right? Because you say that I strongly agree is, this is not a positive thing. However, when you think about inquire about others' well-being, this is a positive thing, right? So this is why in many cases you need to reverse. This is done so you can't allow or you could avoid to that people always answer, let's say strongly agree or agree, right? And if you just suddenly change the question to the opposite, suddenly, people have to be paying attention. Otherwise, these positive and negatives are going to cancel each out, right? And that is going to be something relevant. Well, this is the kind of question that you could find, for example, as well for in terms of consciousness, right? You could find something like I'm exacting in my work. Continue until everything is perfect. Do things according to a plan. You can see that this kind of scale is going to be really focusing to be aware and conscious of what you are doing and how on the timeline. And so you have this kind of key things scale that you want to understand: agreeableness, consciousness, extraversion, and so on, right? Here you have the question, people answer, and you may need to revert some of the scales depending on the case. Well, this is a little bit a prototypical example. The first thing that you want to do is to understand, the overall information contained in the survey. Easy way to do that is just to use principal component of factor analysis or similar, where you identify the number of key relevant variables that are going to be there, and then you could kind of select how many do you want depending on some criteria, right? And here is what you have is a script plot where you are doing exactly that. And what you see in this kind of example is you have one variable, like you summarize the whole, you decompose the whole data set into one variable, you are able to understand a lot of information, right? If you increase by other variable, the marginal increase of information that you're able to understand or variance to actually explain is more, but marginally is smaller than the previous one, and so on, right? And after some criteria, you reach a point where you just, for even if you add more variables, you are going to gain very little information. And of course, there is an equilibrium between the amount of variables and the amount of kind of marginal increase of information that you are having there. So you could select a number of them according to that criteria. Obviously, in many other cases, and here is very important to go back to the purpose of the psychometric survey, just to check if this is actually what you wanted, right? Like, is this something that was in line to your thoughts? And for example, in terms of our case, we need to have 5, right? However, you can find like one of these it could be 6 and the other 7. Never mind, this is a little bit the main thing is just to keep something meaningful for the business, right? This is usually pretty much kind of indicative, and in many cases, another reason is to select the points is very related to these thresholds that you can find here and to the business or purpose of the survey. Here you have how it look like two cases where we are going to search for 5 different factors or 8, and these are some kind of clean graphs that you will find from the library Psych, sorry. And one thing that I particularly like to do, I think, is just to check and to create many of these graphs just to see, what happened in layer 5, what happened in layer 3, what happened in layer 8. Then you can see the evolution, because you can see that 5 is really good because you can see all the neuroticism starting with an N are in the same team. If you can check that all the Cs are wearing the same team, and so on. See from consciousness. That is exactly what we wanted, but this is a very particular data set that has been already worked to obtain that, right? So they will be right away to say, yes, this psychometric is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now, when you increase the number of factors, just to check what happened, and by the way, the red dot line is the ones that are supposed to be reversed. When you increase the number of factors, then you create group with a little bit or less amount of questions, right? And in some cases, this could be useful because you could perhaps want to decompose each of the factors into sub-factors. And this is something that there is as well literature for this particular data set that is done and possible. Another different thing I mean, this is very helpful if you want to move question from one to another, you want to recreate the domains, you want to maybe in the future recycle the survey or use it for another purpose was not initially intended. iClass is as well an algorithm is available in Psych, and I found it very interesting. I split the graph of the whole survey into two, so to place it everything in the slide, and you could see something very similar as well. You could see that most of the questions belong to the same domain and very close. And then you can see this beautiful kind of tree branch structure where you could see which are the variables that are more related to each other and how these kind of convert into something, right? This is very useful if you want to remove some questions from the survey. This could help you to identify which are the closest. So, and just to point out, yes, is all of them tend to be very close, and it's very nice to be able to see a little bit the path. I think this complements the previous analysis, although a lot of people will not use that particular one in simultaneously with the previous one. Now we have explored a little bit, and we want to measure that our kind of factors or domains are reliable. There are different ways to do that. Here you have a particular way to do that in this library, but there are different measurements to do that. There are different ways to do that. I think perhaps the more famous one is the Cronbach alpha. This allows you to determine how good are all these questions all together, defining a a domain or a scale. And a general rule of thumb is okay, like if it's higher than 9 is excellent, between 0.8 and 0.9 good, and so on and so forth. Like for example, the alpha for agreeableness is going to be like 70%, which is acceptable. However, for openness is, kind of questionable. For neuroticism is actually good, right? That allow you to see which of them are better or are more reliable. Um, and this give, an idea of what is the internal consistency of these of these domains. And if you remove one question, they're supposed to be more or less stable and measuring something relatively consistent. So as mentioned, we cover exploratory factor analysis, confirmatory factor analysis, how they look like in a very simple way. There are different ways to different measurement. Uh, we just saw Chrombat Alpha and a little bit how that look like and how can be interpreted. And also you have kind of uh, the library that we have been using here, Psych. And if you like Python, then you can use RPy to work on this. This could be an overall view of this part. Let's now try to go a little bit to topic modeling. Now we are talking about the questions that are related to tests. So people introduce free tests, right? And in general, there is a good amount of literature just to work with tests. Natural language processing, right? You need to do some cleaning here and there. You probably need to remove some words and so on. And when you have done that, of course, you should avoid to introduce personal information. And then when you have all the clean data, the initial test, you want to process that further. And the idea is that you cannot read the whole survey, but what you can do is just try to statistically try to create kind of clusters or topics of similar terms and or terms that appear um, simultaneously or tend to appear all together, and try to see what is going on there. Um, Let me show you an example with this library. This is how it look like. We place here some wine. This doesn't come from a survey properly, but it's come from a wine kind of critique number where a place where people were introducing uh, comments about different types of wine, their experience with that wines, and so on. So here you have a number of topics. You could select a number of topics as before, using something similar to the script plot. And basically, when you create that, it could be a little bit confusing because there are different ways to provide that information to the business, right? So let me show you one that we particularly like. Is here you have your clusters and the number of clusters. You could have, let's say, two. I mean, you don't have to have as many as here, but this kind of analysis and representation, you are going to have the cluster, and then here you're going to have the question. I mean, sorry, the words that appear more commonly. And if you select the word, you are going to see where the word is, distribution of the word is within the cluster, right? Very, very interesting. Now, further here, we could actually uh, move this, and from here you have the more common words like flavors, wine, aromas, right? But when you take wine tends to be always in our place, right? It's not like an incredibly characteristic work from this topic. So you could place this to 0, and then you could have the more uncommon words, right? You can see ready to open, open, layered, and very, very related to topic three. You could create something in between, and all of this is going to be very, very good for you to show to the business experts and see what they can do with this. You may need to remove some words. The business partner may like you to join some of these clusters because this has to be meaningful for them, right? To provide value. Well, I think we have covered all the topics, and I think you now have an overall view of how to process surveys, or how different ways to process surveys. Here you have some references. I think this is a really interesting book, very, very, um, um, thoughtful about the area with many, many different techniques, different libraries. Although today I just focus in a particular library, so you have everything easy, and you could just click this link and then you could go there. And the same something similar to the library for topic modeling. Thank you very much.